So on the latest episode of the PCT podcast, we are delighted to be joined by former Aston Villa ladies captain Kerri Welsh. We'll be speaking today about the women's game, overcoming injury and mental resilience, whilst looking into a pathway into coaching. So let's get started. Kerri, how are you today? Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm really good, mate. Thank you. No worries. I'm excited to obviously talk to you over the next hour and talk all things football and injuries and stuff.
Fantastic. Obviously, we are just slightly coming out of the national lockdown at the minute. How's that been affecting you and how are you keeping?
Yeah, it's obviously been tough. I think it's been tough for probably the majority of the population that have been in lockdown. But, you find your own ways of coping with it, whether that's, finding a new hobby, doing your little bits and bobs around the house that you probably would never do. Having those conversations over the phone and just trying to keep yourself busy, really. I'm really fortunate that I've been able to work all the way through and obviously still got a job and stuff. But yeah, it's very different in comparison to normal life, and fingers crossed we can get back to that normality as soon as possible.
Fingers crossed. And again, we'll touch on where you're at in terms of your job, and as you say, you're fortunate there that you've been able to maintain some form of normality. But I want to begin really with your pathway into playing football. So we've seen a meteoric rise in the women's game, and rightly so. Am I right in assuming it wasn't so easy to get involved when you first started? How old were you, and how did you first get involved with playing, Kerri?
Yeah, so very different to how the game is now. Women's football was kind of laughed at, really, if you were to say you wanted to make a career out of the game, whether that was playing or coaching. I remember having a conversation with a teacher of mine at primary school saying, kids get asked the question all the time, what do you want to be when you're older? And mine was always a footballer. I want to be a footballer. I had no interest in education. I would be sat in a classroom and just be constantly thinking about football. It wouldn't interest me to do maths or science or anything like that. And I always remember the response was, oh, well, women's football was banned in the 19 whatever it was banned in, whatever year. And I went, my response was, but it's not banned anymore, miss. Mm-hmm. I always remember the look on her face when I gave that response. And that almost, after that conversation, kind of spurred me on to, one, make a difference and make sure that I did become a footballer and I did make a career out of the game just to prove that person wrong. But at the same time, try and be involved in that change of the women's game and making sure that the next time that a primary school teacher was to ask a little girl what they wanted to be, that when she gave a response of being a footballer, that wasn't laughed at, and the response back from that teacher was, go and chase that dream, go and make a career out of the game, and we'll support you in whatever way we can. So I just started off as a school footballer as anybody else. I kicked a ball around in the garden with my dad. My dad was, and still is, my biggest fan, coach, parent, supporter, taxi driver. And yeah, just found the love of the game from there, really. Played a lot of boys football in school. There wasn't that many sort of girls teams around at that time. But never had any doubt that I wanted to stop playing because of somebody else's opinion. Just always had that passion for the game.
I love that someone else's opinion never really stopped you from wanting to do what you wanted. And we're going to talk about adversity later on in the episode. But so from a early age, really, you were ultimately, I'm going to assume, told, don't chase that. It's not what you should be doing. So how did that feel then when you were playing amongst the boys? Was there a feeling that you didn't belong, or was the a case that they make you feel welcome? How did that feel when you were getting involved?
Yeah, I think and most girls will probably say the same, that once I started to kick a ball, those opinions changed. And that doesn't mean for me to come across as a big head, but as soon as I did start to show that, oh, actually this girl can play football, she's got a little bit about her here, those opinions started to change, and you were no longer the last pick to go on a team. You started to become first pick. You never got laughed at in terms of, oh, what one of the girls wants to play. We want to play full of boys, sort of thing. So, and again, I'm sure I speak on behalf of many girls in my situation at my age, that once you did start to kick that ball and they started to see that you got something about you and you could play and you were probably better than majority of the playground, you started to be accepted a little bit more. And it's interesting that you spoke around, you know, not caring about people's opinions. I am that person that does really care. You know, everybody wants to be liked. Everybody wants somebody to have a positive opinion about them and seek that little bit of reassurance that what you're doing is the right thing. But specifically with this, it was a case of I am going to prove people wrong. I am going to be that person that hopefully can be part of a positive change within the women's game. And obviously the jobs that I'm involved in now, I'm really fortunate to be able to be involved in that. But yeah, the attitudes when I was in primary school sort of 20 odd years ago has definitely sort of changed. I would hope for the better.
So you mentioned there, go from being sort of laughed at, picked last, for example, to being one of the first ones to be picked in a team. And then that must have given you a real confidence boost in terms of your ability and just your all-round mindset. Was that then when you thought, you know what, I'm going to go and really push on with this and chase this dream?
Yeah, I think so. I think my parents were always the type of people that would push me and challenge me and want me to go in the direction of something they knew that I was pretty good at. So I always had that support from home. But those little negative comments and, you know, those slight snidey looks from boys or teachers or whoever it might have been, definitely does spur you on to almost put two fingers up to them people and go, do you know what, in 20 years time, when, you know, you have made a little bit of a career out of the game and you've earned money out of playing that probably would never have happened 20 years ago, it's almost the roles are reversed and I can have a little bit of a smirk on my face and go, do you know what, I proved you wrong.
So can you remember your first official team as such? Who was that you played for?
It was my school team. So my school team ended up becoming a weekend team. So we registered to play in a local league. We weren't very good, I'll be honest. We had a team full of friends that, you know, had a really good relationship with the teacher that took the team on at the time. My dad became heavily involved in that process, and, you know, helped out with the training and the games and stuff. It wasn't structured. I remember playing in the biggest kit and shirt I think I've ever seen in my life. My sleeves were down by the floor. I had to roll my shorts over 4 or 5 times, I think. And yeah, that's when, you know, I played sort of the first competitive football for the first time. And then I was really fortunate then to be able to go into what back then was called a Centre of Excellence, which is now an RTC. And to be completely honest, that wasn't far away from grassroots football in terms of what we got access to. But that kind of kick-started my playing career, really.
So you mentioned the Centre of Excellence there. Am I right in saying that was with Everton?
So I actually started at Stoke.
Oh, right.
So I think it was under 10s that I started at Stoke. I was there for a couple of years. Then moved on to Crewe and spent 2 years. So I moved to Crewe when I was 14, spent 2 years there. And then once I hit 16 and come out of the RTC or Centre of Excellence as it was back then, that's when I moved over to Everton.
So to be fair, from playing for your school team and as you mentioned, back then maybe it wasn't as prevalent as it is now, but they're 3 big clubs that you've gone on and represented. Regardless of, you know, being a female player or a male player, they're 3 big clubs. How did that feel, going from playing in the playground with the boys to playing for these big teams?
You know what? I've always had this immense pride and loyalty to whichever club that I've played for. You know, I've always been very aware of the responsibility that's come with that and the fortunate position that I've been in to go and play for such big clubs. You know, I was in the position that I'm sure many girls wanted to be in, and I never took that for granted. Like you say, those 3 clubs that I've just mentioned there are pretty big clubs in the women's game. And yeah, I just felt a huge amount of pride and I ultimately wanted to work hard and make sure that I gave everything that I could to that club and play well, really.
you've worked extremely hard and got this opportunity now at, as you mentioned there, at 18 years old with Everton, and you suffered the first of a serious injury, your ACL. How did that happen, and what was going through your mind at this point?
Yeah, so I was really young when I done my first ACL. I think I was not long to 19. And obviously I'd been at Everton for 3 years then, or 2.5. Was doing really well, and yeah, I'd had a couple of like my knee had given way a couple of times during a game, during training, and there was no real knowledge around injuries or ACLs, or we didn't have access to a huge amount of physio or anything like that back then. And it was a case of I'd done a couple of weeks of rehab, went back into training, it gave way again. And there was an occasion in training where I'd just taken a penalty in training. I'd gone to kick across my body, and my knee just collapsed. And that's when obviously the club stepped in and just went, we're going to send you for an MRI scan. We're going to send you to the club doctor. Like I said before, there wasn't any real access to anything back then. You were really fortunate if you managed to get a scan through the club. Otherwise, you have to fund everything yourself. So, and to be completely honest, I didn't even know what an ACL was. So I didn't really understand what that type of injury was or what it involved. So never thought that would ever be the case of it being an ACL sort of rehab and repair and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, the scan results come back and showed that I had torn my ACL. And then the process after that was pretty quick in terms of going to see the club doctor, getting an operation. The club at that time were fantastic. They managed to get me in privately so that process happened a little bit quicker. And like I said, I was really naive. I'd never had an injury before. I didn't understand the process of it. I didn't know anybody that had been through that before, so I couldn't really bounce anything off anybody. And I just put my full, complete trust in the club to be able to get me through that process. I think anybody that's ever done their ACL will definitely confirm that it's one of the most horrific things you can ever go through in terms of an injury. You break a bone, you're in a cast for 6 weeks, you start running again. It's fairly simple. With an ACL, it's obviously a full repair, and the pain and the process that you need to go through is a really boring and long one. So yeah, that's kind of where I was at with my first one. And probably my naivety throughout my rehab was a reason why it went again, if I'm being completely honest. When you're a young player, you don't invest as much time into that. You sack off your gym sessions. You don't think, oh, well, what am I doing this for? I want to be running again. I want to be on a ball. And all those important things that I probably should have invested more time into, I didn't do that. I think when you're older, you can start to admit that a little bit more, and on reflection and hindsight's a wonderful thing. But that was number one of 3.
We'll touch onto that shortly, because to suffer one ACL is bad enough, but what you went through is heartbreaking to hear. And how did you overcome that first injury? What was the process? How did you get back to playing, and what was your support network through that?
Yeah, so again, as I've touched on, I was really naive throughout the whole process. Obviously, I had the support of the club with the physios. The first stage was obviously the operation. So I was 19, never had an operation before, never been under anaesthetic. All these things that you don't really think of when you talk about rehab and a process of coming back to playing football. And I always remember I had to obviously travel up to Liverpool for the operation and stay over the night. And I just had a horrendous reaction to the anaesthetic. I was sick when I'd come round. It took me a while to come back round from obviously the operation and stuff. And I was in a ridiculous amount of pain. Morphine is great stuff, but it makes you feel like you're not on this planet. Yeah. But yeah, the pain was just something that I'd never ever experienced before, and something that I wouldn't wish anybody else to go through. So yeah, stage 1 was obviously the operation. In terms of the process of that, you can't walk or drive for 6 weeks. So without going into too much science, when you have a knee operation, your quads fully switch off. So I'd lost complete mobility within my leg, and I had to retrain myself to walk again, try and get off my crutches as quick as possible. And I think the hardest thing for me was just losing that independence. Obviously, I couldn't work, I couldn't play football, I couldn't drive, I couldn't really get out without the support of somebody else. And I think that's where, when you touch on support network, that I had such a fantastic support network around me. My family, my parents were unbelievable throughout not only that one, but all 3 injuries. I think, it's really easy to just see somebody with an injury and see that physical injury, the pain. But what you don't see is that thing that you really enjoy doing, that thing that, you do for free, that's a hobby that you invest so much of your time into, that's taken away from you. And I think that was the most difficult thing for me. Obviously, I couldn't drive to Liverpool, so I was away from my teammates for so long. And as I said, it was a really naive process. It was a really naive 12 months for me that, looking back, if I'd have had a lot more information and research and understanding of that type of injury, would it have happened twice more? I don't know. That's something that I don't think I can probably answer. But I'm very much one of these people that does believe in everything happens for a reason. And for whatever reason, whatever my reason is, unfortunately, I've had 3 ACL injuries. So
we mentioned there, you obviously come back and through that grueling process of getting back, returning to play. Great immense pride, I assume, getting back onto that pitch. And then again, you get another ACL injury. Did you know straight away it was the same? And what were you thinking at this point? Was it a case of, here we go again? Or was it your football career done? What was going through your mind here, Kerri?
Yeah, so as soon as I'd done the second one, I knew straight away what it was. I think if you speak to anybody that's had an ACL injury, they'll tell you, straight away. The person stood next to you on the pitch that can hear that pop or that clicking sound. I think that kind of confirms for you what you've done. But I just remember thinking I always knew it would go again. And I never felt strong coming back to play. My legs and my knee never felt strong. I didn't do my rehab properly. I didn't have access to what I needed to have access to. And that's no fault of anybody's. That's just the position that the women's game was in at the time. So I said it to a couple of people. I always felt like I'd be lucky if it didn't go again. And I never felt strong. So you could say that it was a blessing in disguise that I was able to go and do that process a second time, but do it properly. Or you could say that I'm really unlucky for it to go again. But I just remember when it went the second time, just thinking, I'm in a better position now than I was before in terms of understanding of the injury, being able to go through the rehab process and do that properly. But also obviously that feeling of devastation that I've got to go through another 9-month process of rehab. I was playing really well at the time. I just had access to the first team at Aston Villa when it had gone. But again, I had fantastic support around me, physios, the club, my family. So I've always been really fortunate in that aspect.
Was it the same knee that went?
Yeah.
Wow. So again, you're in that process. Are you thinking maybe all this years of dreaming and wanting to be a footballer maybe isn't for you? Or was that not in the mindset and the thought process?
Do you know what? I always thought I was almost in a position where every time that I felt like I was doing well, or I felt like something was going really well for me, or I was succeeding at something would happen. And that could have been an ACL injury. It would have been something else. So I always felt like whenever I felt like I was onto something really good, or I was starting to really get some success, that it would be taken away from me in some capacity. In this instance, it would have been a 9-month rehab process and another operation. But I just remember having this real determination and feeling in a much better place because I had such a better understanding of the injury. And I had a really good relationship with the physio there at the time, who I had complete 100% trust in him being able to get me back, fitter, stronger, in a much better place, to make sure that it wouldn't go again. But I was also in a position where, because I wasn't strong coming back from the first one, my right leg was then taking so much of a hit in terms of I wouldn't change direction on my left foot. I would always change direction on my right foot. All these little things that, from a confidence and sight perspective, when you speak to an injured person, somebody who's had a long-term injury, these things will start to come out. So I would put so much weight and do everything through my right leg to almost protect my left. So my right leg had took a little bit of a battering. So I think it was only a matter of time before that one kind of crumbled, and yeah, it was only a matter of time and that went. So
what helped you get through that second ACL injury? What would you say to anybody who might be going through that process now? What was important to you to remain focused and disciplined to play again?
I think the biggest advice that I could give to somebody going through that is to make sure you don't isolate yourself, and just be completely open and honest with, you know, the scenario that you're in and how you're feeling at that time, because you play football because you want to be involved with your teammates, you want to play on a weekend, you train throughout the week, you work hard. And when you're injured, you don't get that. You don't play football to be injured. And so I think it's really important to obviously stay connected with your teammates. I said this in an interview that I'd done a couple of years ago about it, that ultimately I wasn't a player. And for those 9 months, I was no longer a player. And I think that's the thing that kind of hit home the most for me, that I was the water boy. I was the number one fan. I was the kit man. I was the one that tidied up the changing room at the end of a game. I'd be everybody's biggest fan. I'd be encouraging from the bench. I'd be collecting cones in. I'd be the ball boy. I'd be everything except a player. And I think that was the most difficult thing for me to kind of get my head around, is that ultimately when you're an injured player, you're not a priority. And, you know, as much as your teammates and your coaches and the staff at the club will get around you and try and involve you, ultimately you're there to play football. And if you're not training and you're not involved in the match day squad, that's hard to feel involved. But I think the biggest learning for me and the biggest advice that I could ever give is to not isolate yourself. Go and be that the team's biggest fan. Go and be the kit man. Go and be, you know, as daft as it seems, go and fill everybody's water bottles up. Go and do the little things that make you feel valued and make you feel still involved. But at the same time, make sure you do everything within your power to work hard and get back on the pitch as soon as you can.
So we're here talking about your playing career, Kerri, but then the second injury also impacted your working career. How did that affect the roles that you're in? Obviously, off your feet for 6 weeks in the rehabilitation process.
Yeah, so to be fair, all three injuries, whoever I've worked for, have always been really supportive. They've always understood that, you know, as ridiculous as this sounds, but football's always come first for me, and it always has. It's always been the first thing. I've always revolved my life around it. And any time that I've needed off, whether that be for a game, for training, to go for a scan, to go for an operation, they've always supported me with that. Obviously, the jobs that I've done have been really practical, whether that's coaching, or the various jobs that I've done. Obviously, you're on your feet, and you need to demonstrate stuff. You need to be able to use both feet in terms of being on your feet all the time within a session. You'll know as a coach that you don't stop for those 2 hours or whatever that you're coaching for. You genuinely don't stop, and that's really hard when you've just had your ACL reconstructed. But like I said, the workplaces that I've worked for have been really supportive with that, and ultimately have paid me throughout that process. So I was really fortunate and lucky with that, to have such a supportive kind of workplace behind me.
So you've had a good support network, great mental strength to get through 2 ACLs on the same leg. You return to play, captain your side. You must be feeling good at this point. And
Yeah.
then lightning strikes again. 2017, you suffer your third ACL tear, this time in your opposite leg. Kerri, what must be going through your head at this point?
Honestly. So I remember after the second one, and I said to my parents at the time, and I went, if it goes again, I'm not going through that process. I said, if it happens again, I'm hanging my boots up, that'll be me done. And then the minute that I'd done it, there was never any doubt in my mind that I would come back again. It was always a case of, right, when I don't need a scan, don't waste your money on a scan because I know what it is. When can I have my operation? And by this point, I was probably an expert in ACL rehab. I didn't need anybody to tell me what I needed to do. I could have done it on my own, and that's no disrespect to anybody that helped me along the way, but I'd just been through it twice before. The surgeon that did my second one, I'd built a really good relationship with. And I always remember that I did it on the Sunday, and the Sunday night I messaged him on the way home, and I just went, "Hi Pete, looks like I've done my ACL again. No, I'm not joking. Any chance you can see me?" And he was unbelievable. And I think from me getting injured to having the operation was 2 weeks. So you could say that I had the surgeon on speed dial, or you could say that he was just really good at his job. But yeah, you talk about a support network. For me to be able to message Pete and just say, "Is there any chance you can squeeze me in? I've done it again."
Me again.
Yeah, it's obviously in a really good position, but yeah, I just remember thinking, I'm definitely coming back from this. No one's going to tell me that I can't. I remember sitting in front of a surgeon actually the once, and he was in Stoke. I managed to get in to see him through a family friend, and his words were, why are you trying to come back? You've done it once. Why are you trying to come back from a second one? He went, you do know that you've only got a 40% chance of coming back to play football. And the more times you do it, the less chance you've got of returning to play. And I didn't say a word in the room. I obviously let him speak, and my dad was with me at the time. I remember coming out and going, with a few swear words involved, "Dad, he's not operating on me."
Yeah.
And I just went, that's not happening. And that's obviously when I went to see Pete, and I told Pete at the time that, this is what the other surgeon had said to me, and he went, "There's no reason why you can't come back and be at the same level that you were before." And he said that to me on the second one, and he said that to me on the third one. And I think for somebody who, as a surgeon, would operate on hundreds of people, thousands of people in a year, he made me feel like I was the only person he was operating on.
Wow.
And for somebody to do that, and for somebody to make me feel so settled about the operation and the process that I was about to go through for a second and third time, I think speaks volumes about him. And I would message him after the operation and go, "Pete, I've got this pain. Is this normal? Or I've got this bruising in this part of my knee. Is this normal?" And he'd reply within the hour, and he'd go, "Stop worrying, stop stressing. This is normal."
Wow.
So I think, you talk about support network. I think I had the people around me that I needed, and I was really fortunate with that as well.
That sent sort of like shivers down my spine for that. How somebody who's so skilled, and as you mentioned, has probably operated on hundreds and possibly thousands of people, made you feel like you're his only patient, and that must have given you inspiration and motivation to come back even more to sort of support his work.
Yeah, definitely. And I've sent a number of players over to Pete to get theirs done. It's like we have a running joke now that I need to be on commission to send all these people over to him to get their ACL done. But do you know what? We need people like that in the women's game at the minute, because we're just not at the stage where we are in the men's game, where you can get an operation within a week. So yeah, I just think for somebody who isn't really involved in the game, is just a surgeon that operates on knees every day of his life. I just think he's an incredible person. I certainly don't think I would have been sat here now with won a championship medal that I've got, because I've been able to return and come back stronger than I was before. But also giving me that mental strength to want to come back from a second and a third.
I can only assume here that suffering a serious injury can put you as a professional footballer in some dark places at some dark times, but not just once, not twice, but with yourself 3 times, Kerri. And I've got to say, I have the utmost respect and admiration for you. You must have unbreakable psychological strength to overcome these injuries and to continue to play at a very high standard. It's not like you've lowered your level. You've come back and pushed on. So talk to us through the emotions then that you felt on your return against Coventry United, scoring twice in just 7 minutes and securing a 3-2 win. That you must have gone to heaven and back.
Yeah, it's certainly a moment that I won't forget. I think you touched on there just before I touched on the Cov game around that mental strength, and I think, you know, people say that to me all the time. You know, you're one of the strongest individuals that I've worked with to come over what you've overcome. You don't feel like that when you're going through a rehab process for a second and a third time. You almost feel like, you know, you don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. Majority of your rehab's on your own, so it's really boring and repetitive. And like you say, you have to find that strength from somewhere within to make sure that you do come back from it properly and you do your rehab properly. I think my biggest motivation was proving people wrong. So wanting to, like I said at the beginning, put 2 fingers up to people that ever said that I couldn't. But also I also wanted to not repay my parents and my family for what they'd invested into me in terms of time, but I knew I had so much to achieve still. And I hadn't achieved that. And I wasn't prepared to stop until I had. I don't think I've achieved what I wanted to achieve or could have achieved. That could be down to the injuries that I've had and not been able to play consistently for a number of years. But I do think it's important that you've got those people around you to support you through that process. And going to the Cov game now, that I always remember the build up to the week. So I knew I'd come on. So I knew I'd get like kind of 10, 15 minutes would be my maximum game time in that game. I remember feeling like so nervous before the game, and I'm not one of these people that'll speak quite openly about you know, the way that I'm feeling, or if I'm quite an internal thinker. I remember thinking in the build up to the week, I've never felt so nervous going into a game, and I knew I'd be coming on, so I knew that I'd have the opportunity to warm up properly and do everything that I needed to prior to the game. And it was only a friendly game. I think we were 2-1 down at the time. And obviously my parents were there as well. And I remember coming on and we got a free kick. And we got a free kick that was just inside our own half. And I remember standing on the touchline waiting to come on, and like I've got my hands shaking, like butterflies in my belly, like proper nervous, like I'd never felt nerves before. I remember coming on, and the girl that was taking the free kick, Alicia Endow, she just kind of put a thumb up to me as I'm in the box and just went, "Oh, like, Kez, like, are you ready?" So I was like, "Yeah, but there's no way you're getting this ball into the box from there, mate. Like, just carry on with the free kick." And to be fair to her, she's put a really good ball into the box, and I've kind of read it. Their back line's not read it. The keeper's hesitated, and I've come round and just like managed to get my head on the ball and just flick it round the keeper. And do you know what? The relief that I felt, and it was almost that reassurance that I needed that coming back from that injury was the right thing to do. And obviously that my teammates were around me and all that sort of stuff. And it's almost like a surreal moment to really like replay back into your mind. And then about 2 minutes later, we had a cross come across the box and I scored. I remember looking over at my parents and thinking, like, I went over to celebrate with them, and I just thought, I want to share this moment with them. Like, they've been every step of the way. In the back of my head, I'm thinking, why are you celebrating a goal in a friendly? But it meant more than that. The moment meant more than that. The experience meant more than that. And just to have my parents there on the day that had supported me throughout the whole process of not just that one, but all three, was a moment that I don't think I'll ever forget. And yeah, it makes me smile as I'm talking about it, to be fair.
I can just imagine that moment. As you say, what I didn't realise doing the research prior to was that almost then your first touch coming back from injury, the goal.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Wow. That has just got headlines written all over it. It was that moment was made for you, wasn't it?
I'd like to think so.
Have you got that on film anywhere? And have you kept it in a little memory box for later on?
Yeah, I think there's like a highlight reel of the game, and then obviously the 2 goals. So it'll be somewhere I can dig it out.
Superb. And as you say, all of that hard work, the frustration, the sacrifice came back in those 2 moments. And then further down the line, championship winning with Aston Villa, that must have been the absolute icing on the cake. 3 career-ending injuries. I can't imagine the amount of hours of mental anguish, frustration, sacrifice. How good did that feel, lifting the title as captain?
Do you know what? Really strange, because obviously it happened throughout COVID. Okay. So it wasn't the moment that we'd all planned or prepared for in terms of, the big celebration of us winning the league, and we would have been at home in the last game of the season, so we've been able to celebrate that with the fans and obviously all of our family and friends. And it was a really weird moment, because we'd waited something like 4 or 5 weeks to get confirmation that we were actually going to win the league and get promoted. Obviously, the league had been cancelled due to COVID, and we didn't know whether it'd be null and void or whether we would get the confirmation of promotion. So I think it was a sigh of relief initially when we got the news, but a really weird moment that I'm celebrating in my bedroom with the rest of my teammates on a Zoom call. Yeah. And we weren't able to celebrate in that way, but just a really proud moment. Something that we as a group, myself individually, had worked so hard for. And just really privileged to be in at a football club that had invested the amount of time and finances into us and believed in us that we could go and win the trophy. So yeah, a real weird moment, but a nice moment at the same time.
So Kerri, you mentioned obviously the psychological differences of getting through the injury. What did you go through psychologically when you returned to play then?
Do you know what? And we were just having this conversation off air that sometimes you see an injury and you see a longer term injury and you just see the physical aspect of it. You just see a broken leg or a muscle injury or a knee injury, and you just think it's purely physical, and it's not. You go through, specifically in ACL rehab, you go through a journey of emotions throughout that period of 9 months. You'll go through, at the start, you're kind of nervous, angry. You know what's coming. You know that the 9 months are going to be quite tough and you're going to be out for a long period of time. And then obviously you have the operation and you go through that pain barrier. So it's still physical. And I call it the honeymoon period. So your first couple of months are a little bit like your honeymoon period, where, your rehab's new to you, being injured is new to you. And you're working hard within your rehab, you do everything that physio asks, and then you get to like a 2-3 month period where you're not around your teammates, you're still doing the boring stuff, and you're not really progressing at a rate that you want to progress at. But that's because that's the nature of the injury, and you won't progress. You'll do, as an example, you won't run or kick a ball for the first 4 months, and that to an athlete is like, that's your bread and butter. Like being able to run, being able to kick a ball, being able to train, that's what you turn up for. And to not be able to do that, you have to retrain yourself to walk within those first couple of weeks. You lose your independence with your driving and stuff. And it just becomes a really difficult period, probably halfway through your rehab. And in specifically talking around the return to play, was that I remember thinking, specifically on the third one, the last one that I came back from, I just felt this overwhelming fear of, in one aspect, I couldn't wait to get back and do the thing that I love doing, which was playing. In the same aspect, I'd kind of got this 50-50 where I didn't want to come back because I didn't want to go through that rehab again. I didn't want to get injured again. So I had this conversation with coaches, my family and stuff, and I just went, I was in a stage where I didn't know what Kerri looked like post-football. And I'd 100% made a decision after the third one that I wasn't going to go through that process of rehab again if it ever went again. I was prone to that type of injury, doing it 3 times. And I just remember struggling with, well, what happens if it goes again? Do you know what I mean? Like, what does happen if unfortunately that injury does come back and I have to go through a 4th process? I don't think I would have been able to do that. So I'd kind of made my mind up in my head that it would be a case of me retiring and hanging my boots up and whatever. And I really struggled over a period of maybe 12 months of not being okay with not playing football, and not really being okay with, what do I do when I stop playing? What do I look like? I knew I wanted to go into coaching, but did I really want to go into coaching? Was it too soon for me? When you're 15, 16, you think you're going to play till you're 45, 50. You don't ever think you're going to have to retire. Yeah. And when that kind of comes a little bit sooner than you expect it to, it's a hard process to go through. It's a difficult process to kind of get your head around. So I remember playing with this, the 2 years in that I'd returned, playing with this fear of getting injured again, fear of my career being over, fear of, I think the biggest fear for me was I knew I could go through the physical pain again. I knew I could deal with that. I knew I could deal with the operation. The rehab wasn't an issue for me. I think it was just that fear of me not being in control of where my next steps were and when that would be. People always said to me, why did you come back from your injuries? And I always said, because I wanted to be in control of when my career finished. That sounds like a really stupid comment. But when you know, and when you've been through a process of understanding that it can be taken away from you so easily, with just a slight over change of direction, or you land a little bit funny, and within a finger's click, it's gone. So I think it was just that process of I'm back doing the thing that I really love doing and enjoy doing, but at the same time, what happens if it happens again? What do I look like post career? And I always remember in those last 12 months, last season, I'd had it in my head that this would be my last year. I understood that I might not get a contract at the end of the season. I wasn't playing as much as I wanted to. And I just think it was a build-up of that fear of getting injured again, that anxiety of what do I look like after I finish playing. I really struggled with that. I couldn't get my head around it. And I just ended up getting myself in this 6 to 8 months of a little bit of a mess, really. I'm turning up to training and I'm thinking, this could be my last year. It could be my last year because I don't get offered a contract, or it could be my last year because I get injured again. And that's a hard thought process for somebody to understand that's not been through that. But I think any athlete will tell you that when you come to that stage of retirement, it's quite a hard thing to accept and go through. And I've said this to a few people now, that lockdown come at a really good time for me. I'd got myself in a cycle of working, football, and I just got consumed in this, as I've said, a little bit of a mess. I'd spoken to a few people, a few psychologists around trying to get rid of that fear of playing, and a couple of people were good, a couple of people were bad. A little bit of a mix of feedback in terms of those people. But I think people look at a sports psychologist and think, oh, I'm not going to one of them. This isn't for me, or I'll just be okay. I think it got to a point where I probably should have spoken to that person maybe 6 months prior to when I did. And I don't think I would have been in the position that I was in around this time 12 months ago. But I don't think I'm ashamed to say it, that I think it's important that you go and speak to somebody if you need to, specifically around the athlete side of it, that athletes constantly tell you that they'll play without confidence, they'll play with fear, they'll, they struggle to get themselves out of a bad run of training and games. For me, if that's the case, go and speak to somebody, go and speak to that sports site. They're qualified in that field to go and get you out of that. And there's this stigma around going and talking to people that, you're seen as a little bit weak, or you're seen as, why are you doing that? It's only an injury. It's only football. The amount of times I got told it's only a game. It is only a game. Mm-hmm. The game's been my life since I was 8 years old. And yeah, so lockdown come at a really good time. I did a little bit of CBT over lockdown that really helped me get out of those thought processes of being okay with football coming to an end, being okay with potentially getting injured again, and just helping me through that anxious stage of being able to control that anxiety myself. It is a hard and a difficult injury to go through, and I'm rambling on a little bit now, but I do think it's really important that if those are the thought processes that you're going through during that type of an injury, or through any type of injury, it's important to speak about it and get it out your system, because the last thing you want is for that to go on and on and on, and you end up being in a position where you probably need that help a little bit quicker than you probably needed it. But these are the things of an injury. This is the side of an injury that people don't necessarily think about straight away, but are probably the most important things of it.
There's a couple of things I'd like to just sort of touch on there that you mentioned, Kerri, is that you mentioned this honeymoon period, and then after the honeymoon period, it sounds like it becomes a real dark, lonely place. And why would you say that players feel that they can't speak to the management or the staff or the coaches about how they're feeling? Is it fear of being dropped on the return to play, or as you mentioned, being seen as weak and not able to deal with the demands of football? What was it that got you over that hurdle to open up and say, listen, I need a little bit more support?
I think it's that obviously you have kind of, you come back to play, and then you don't potentially play as much as you wanted to, or you end up sitting on the bench for a long period of time because you can't go back and play 90 minutes straight away. Views that you then sort of start to do, the players will learn and feed off that. You'll see it all the time when you see a coach on the side that shouts, balls, screams. Players start to do that. If you're a coach that's very quiet and calm, and the players also echo that, but at the same time, they then become a very quiet group on the pitch, and when a game becomes tough, they start to crumble a little bit. So I think it's difficult to get that balance, but then at the same time, they are people first, and football will only be there for a short period of time, and there'll be a person after football. So it's important that we support them within that process of becoming good human beings along the way.
A couple of shameless plugs here, but a previous episode that we did with a lady called Philippa McGregor, a psychologist who works within the Manchester City football group and has now branched out to herself, speaks about that development phase and the changes in the adolescent brain, and how as coaches can recognise that and nurture that rather than cast it aside. And a gentleman called Steve Salis, I don't know if you've seen much of him, but he really sparked an interest in me in the summer on my A licence of don't be the downgrade. So every player is going to see a coach and then judge his next coach or her next coach on the previous coach. So if you're that downgrade, they'll never remember you.
Yeah.
And for me, that really resonates, is that, I'm fortunate enough to have gone in at a club now with somebody who I know, and, the players do talk, and I don't want to fall into those habits. And I don't want to be that downgrade. I would love to be that coach that when they go on to their next coach or their next team or whoever it may be, he was great. He did this, he did that. I think it's up to us as coaches to always do more. And I know we spoke off air about a certain environment that was great and always wanting to do more. I don't think we can do enough at times, and the more we can do, the better coach will be and the better person the player will be. For me, that's my honest opinion.
Do you know what though? I was smiling as you were saying that, because there is so much more to coaching than you just delivering a session. And sometimes as a player you don't see that, but you do want to do the best for that player. You do want to do the best for that group. You want to make sure that the experience that you're providing for that person is a really, really good one, so that when they go on to the next stage, whatever that is, they're in a better place. And I think we always talk about in that development phase that we want our players to play and go on and reach the potential, whatever that person's individual potential is. And that might be grassroots football, that might be professional, senior, international football, but as long as we make sure that we help them reach that potential, and everybody's potential and individual ability is different, so not everybody's going to go on the same journey and reach the same highs as each other, but it is really important. It means a lot to a coach if you go then to somebody else's environment and go, really enjoyed that environment, really enjoyed that coach, really enjoyed the environment that they created. And that sometimes it's a lot more than the detail that you give. I think we can get caught up sometimes in what information am I giving, what detail am I giving. Sometimes that's forgotten about when you move on. It's what were they like as a person, how did they treat you? And I always remember this quote that constantly resonates with me, and it's something that I really, really believe in, is that people will always remember how you were treated. And I do think it's a really good comment, because I think when you look at yourself personally, you look at individuals that you've come and you've met and you no longer speak to, or you met and you stay in contact with, that's because you've built a good relationship with that person. That's because there's a mutual respect. It's because you liked the way that you were treated. And I think it's so important now that you almost leave a little bit of a mark with people. And good people will do that. Good environments will create that. And sometimes, the detail that you've given to a striker and when to come to feet, when to go and behind is just completely forgotten about. It's more about, how did you speak to them? How did you treat them? What environment did you create for that person? It's so important.
And we talk about confidence, and you've mentioned it earlier in the conversation, is that we talk about confidence, but what is confidence? Is it that striker, for example, banging 20 goals, or is it how you make them feel around their environment? Do they feel on cloud nine that every opportunity they get, that they're going to be supported by you? And a good friend of mine, in a game we went 2-1 down, and I'll be honest, I went and sat down on the bench, and he said, stand up. I was like, why? He said, stand up. He says, because
players are watching.
Players are watching you. Stand up. He says, and they'll react to your mood. And we, fair enough, we stood up, and through my good friend, we made a couple of changes. But it was that moment, and I can remember speaking. I actually spoke to one of the players, and this is 4 years later. He said, I remember looking over the bench and seeing both you and Marlon stood up.
Yeah.
And it's something that you don't realise at the time. And
you understand that though as a player, that when you are in a difficult game, or I don't think it just relates to a difficult game. I think it relates to a game as well. When you're 8-9-0 up, how does that coach behave on the side? Are you in a bit of an arsehole because you're 8-9-0 up, or are you encouraging your players to still do the right things in the right way? Are you encouraging your players to still show that respect to the opposition? Because I like to think that if that was a role reverse and you were on the end of an 8-9-0, I'd like the opposition to do the same. And I always remember as a player looking over at the bench and thinking, I think I need a little bit more from a coach here. We're 1-1. We've got 10 minutes to go, or whatever it might be. Why is that coach not giving us a little bit more? Or I've played under some good coaches, some bad coaches, some shouty coaches, some quiet coaches, and I think it then forms you when you finish playing, going into coaching. That kind of, all those experiences make you the coach you are. And yeah, it's really important that when you look over on the side, and I always think, what are the players thinking? Because the first thing the players will do is look over at the bench. They'll look over to you as an individual and go, we need help here. What do you want us to do?
You alluded to it earlier, Kerri, and I'm a firm believer of this, that teams are a reflection of their coach or manager. And
100%.
And I'll even admit in academy football, I'm probably going to do myself a disservice here, but I went into the academy system thinking it was a whole different level of coaching, and it was this magic curtain, and I'll not name the club, but I can remember looking across at the touchline and seeing the behaviours of the coach and thinking, it's no better than grassroots behaviour.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change. People won't change. People are who they are, and I'd always like to think that when you come across my teams or we played, is that you remember, oh, he was okay.
Yeah.
Wasn't an idiot. He was humble. He treated the players right. He didn't shout and scream. And that's a direct reflection of how they play. And that'll evolve. I'm sure it will as the game evolves. But I think in football there's this magic curtain at times, and you mentioned too.
It doesn't exist. Yeah.
It is just. If you win on the Saturday or Sunday, Monday's just a little bit happier.
Yeah.
If you lose, it's not as happy, but you focus on your next game. And
yeah, definitely, mate. But I do think as well that coaches are still human beings. They still feel that emotion. They still feel that they still want to win. No coach wants to lose. And I think that's something that we do have to give coaches a little bit of leeway with, is that you can be emotional on the side, you can make reactive decisions, you can make reactive comments, but the more you coach, the more games that you coach in, the more different type of games that you coach, the more different experiences that you put yourself in, you evolve as a person and a coach within that. And
I don't think you quite understand until you actually become a coach.
No, yeah, I agree. And you know what? I would always look at a coach and think, oh, they're really confident, they're really self-assured, they know what they're doing, all these things. Now I'm a coach. Sometimes I don't feel any of them. Sometimes I do feel really vulnerable. I do feel really exposed. I do feel like my comfort zone, probably more than I do feel confident. But, and I've said this so many times before, that got to be able to blag your way out of it a little bit when you're a coach. That in a way, coaching is a little bit of a blag. And if you can make the players believe what you're saying and the information that you're giving, then I don't think you're doing a bad job. And that does a disservice to coaching and football. But ultimately, your players have got to believe in what you're saying.
So we spoke off air just before we started recording that at the moment you are currently retired. Hopefully for anybody that knows you, that isn't you fully retired, and it's just COVID doing that. But when was it that you first got into coaching then, Kerri? Obviously you were playing, and you mentioned earlier in the conversation that you've always wanted to inspire that next generation of young women and young girls that want to play and can have excellent role models like yourself. When was it that you first got into coaching?
So I've been involved in coaching for 15, 16 years. Something that I'd started volunteering doing when I was 13. And I've always had this understanding that I would need to have something when I finished playing. And I've always been in a situation where I've had to work alongside football. So I've never been able to, like you can now, go make a full-time career out of the game and earn a decent amount of money. I've always had to work alongside that and find myself a career that would pay me the money to enable me to go and play. And coaching's always been something that I've enjoyed doing. I really enjoy coaching the younger kids, in terms of, you'll know this, you've coached younger kids, that the they don't realise the impact that they have on you as an individual and a coach. You could have had the worst day at work, you'll go and coach a group of under nines, and that day will have just been completely forgotten. So I think coaching gives me a sense of value. I think it gives me the opportunity to go and make an impact on individuals and groups. And at the minute, that's kind of filling that gap of playing at the minute. Also, I'm really fortunate to be doing what I'm doing now and the opportunities that I've been given, but I do feel like coaching is something that I've come away from and then I've gone back into, and I've come away from and I've gone back into. And there's a reason why I keep going back to coaching. Obviously, I did all my coaching badges throughout my playing time. Your career is a very short one, your playing career. So I always knew that I'd need to make sure I had something in place so that when that time did come, that I would have something to fall straight into, really. But I also didn't want to finish playing and then start to think about what I wanted to do. I always wanted to be able to make sure that I wasn't sitting there thinking about, do I play, do I not play? What do I look like post football? Because that's all I've ever done. And it was certainly the right thing to do. Definitely, that's the best advice I would give to any player. Make sure you've got something to fall back into. Your career is exceptionally short, and I think the injuries kind of confirmed that to me, that it can be taken away from you so quickly and within a split second. And I do think as players we take playing for granted. I don't think we ever think that, when you're 12, 13, 14, 15, you think you're going to play forever. And then when you get to your late 20s and you start to think, oh, my body's not recovering as well as it did do 10, 15 years ago, or, you start to pick up little niggles and little injuries and stuff. So I just wanted to make sure that I had something to fall straight into. Unfortunately, I've been given the opportunity to do that. So for the short term, that's definitely filling the hole of playing. Whether that'll continue to fill that hole, I'm not too sure, but we'll see.
One thing I'm always intrigued about, and I never played at a high level, so what intrigues me is that as a player playing at a high standard, when you start to do your coaching qualifications, does it impact you as a player? And do you start to see the game differently? And how does it affect relationships with your coaches and managers?
So, yeah, so you are right in terms of you start to see the game differently. I think, for those players that don't coach, it's very easy for them to go, and you'll hear it all the time. Why have you set us up in that way? Why have you picked that player over me? Why have we not made subs earlier, or why have we not done X? Players will ask questions all the time of coaches. And I think when you start to coach and you go through that process, you understand those decisions a little bit more. And I certainly started to see the game in a very different way. The game's now in the modern era where, you don't play 4-4-2 and just lump it long in behind the back four anymore. There's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot more thought processes behind it, and there's a lot more analysis and research that goes into the game now. And I also think that the injuries gave me the opportunity to learn. Okay. And I did see the game from a different perspective being on the sideline. But I also made sure that when I was playing, I didn't just play the game. Like, I would listen to what coaches would say. I would listen to, the detail that they'd give at halftime, or the way that they'd use a tactics board in the changing room, or I'd be nosy. So I would ask questions and I'd go, why did we do that? Or can you talk me through how you want to get the patterns out of in possession for this week? Or, can you let me sit down with you and watch you do your pre-match and your post-match analysis of a game or training? And I just used the opportunity to learn. And I think me doing that has definitely put me in a better position now to be able to go and coach and lead a group. And this might sound, people might disagree with this, but you don't learn an awful lot on coaching courses. They give you bits of information. They give you the very basics of what you need to know. They give you kind of your first stepping stone. But I think the experience and being around other coaches and other people in different environments will ultimately put you in the best position possible to go and be the best coach you can be. I think, you know, if you only do courses and then you go and coach, I think you'll be a very different coach to somebody that's gone in and learned and gone and watched other people. And, you know, I'm sure you being a coach, you spend half your life, half of your evenings watching games, watching other people, going through, listening to podcasts, reading books about stuff, watching stuff on Twitter and social media and all that sort of stuff, just to make yourself better informed. You know, I think some people see the game as being really easy for a coach, when in reality it's not. It's far from it. And, you know, it's not just about what happens on the pitch. There's a lot of planning that goes on before that. There's a lot of planning and thought processes that go on after training and games. And I always remember listening to, I think it might have been Steven Gerrard on a Monday Night Football, or he was giving an analysis on a game, and he went, you have to become obsessed with the game. If you want to succeed in the game of football, you have to be obsessed. And I think that's something that kind of hit home to me, is that I don't think you have to be obsessed with it, but I think you have to invest into it. You know, you can't just turn up, deliver a session and go home. There's a lot more to it than that. And there's a lot more time that you'll give without being paid to do that as well. Yeah. There's a lot of sacrifices that come with being involved in the game. But I find coaching at the minute one of the most frustrating things I've ever done, but also one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done. Yeah. And that sounds like a madness comment. But I come away from a session sometimes and think, what am I doing? Why am I coaching? This is ridiculous. What I've just delivered there is embarrassing. And then I'll come away from the next session and go, can't wait for the next one.
Yeah.
So, and you'll understand that being a coach.
It's certainly a roller coaster, and I'm going to go back to your point about the courses. Courses are brilliant to get you your qualification and that foot in the door or whatever, but the vital learning is on the pitch. And yeah. I posted from our socials probably 6 weeks ago. The last 18 months with COVID and everything else, I've done nothing but study, and I feel like I'm ready to explode. I need to go and put it into practice, because I can have all this knowledge in my head, but if I can't implement it onto players and learn from those experiences, then it's just going to be that knowledge. So I completely get what you say there in terms of courses. Obviously now you're in semi-retirement, we'll call it flexible retirement. Is getting into management, head coaching, something that you're looking to get into? I know our mutual friend Chloe mentioned she's tried to tempt you a few times.
I did hear that comment. I did. Do you know what? I think, if I'm going to be honest, I don't think I'm ready for that at the moment. I'm very early on in my coaching career. I'm in a really fortunate position in terms of I'm leading an age group. So I'm leading the under-16s at Aston Villa RTC, but I'm also assisting with the under-21s. And I think I'm in a really fortunate position in that sense, that I'm getting the opportunity to learn with one group and watch how somebody coaches and coach somebody else's ideas and philosophy. But then I'm also getting the opportunity to lead and put my own stamp on an age group and the way I see the game being played. So I feel like I don't feel like I can be in a better position than I'm in at the moment. You know, I'm learning from some exceptional coaches and some really good people. So I'm going to continue to learn and see where that takes me. If that takes me into management, great. If it takes me into assistant, then that's great. But at the moment, I'm happy in what I'm doing. I'm happy with where I'm at. And like I say, I'm in a really fortunate position. And people will ask me all the time, why are you not playing? Why have you not gone and played elsewhere? And the answer that I'll always give is that I'm happy. And at the minute, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. And I feel like at the minute, me going back into playing wouldn't give me that same enjoyment that I'm getting at the moment. So I'm still training, I'm still keeping fit. So we could be having a different conversation in 6 months' time. But at this moment in time, I'm just enjoying what I'm doing.
Fantastic. And with everything that you've been through, Kerri, it's great to hear those words that you're happy, and everything that we've gone through in the last 18 months as a world, a globe, really. It's great to hear that you're happy. What you mentioned there, you've touched on what the future holds for you, and before we head to the quick fire questions, what advice would you give to any aspiring footballers listening to this podcast?
Have no regrets and take nothing for granted. And within that process, just work exceptionally hard. Don't come away from it and blame other people for you not succeeding at something, or I think you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't work hard, I don't think you'll get anywhere. So definitely work hard, and that doesn't. People say you got to work hard, and you'll look at it and think, I've got to run extra training, I've got to do an extra running session in the week. It's not about that. It's about, what are you eating? How much sleep are you getting? Are you hydrating yourself in the right way? Are you being the most professional person that you can be, both on and off the pitch? What people are you surrounding yourself with? Are these people that are supporting you, or are these people holding you back? I think it's important that we don't just look at hard work in a sense of, I run 12k every day, or I run more than everybody else in training. That's a huge factor, but it's also a lot more than that. So I think that would be my biggest advice to somebody.
Fantastic. This is where you might get a little bit back and dig a few teammates out and managers, but quick fire, not a lot of them last. They don't last potentially quick fire. So if you want to elaborate, you can do. But who's your best friend in football?
I'm probably gonna have to say Chloe, because if I don't, she'll probably kill me. I've not known Chloe for a huge amount of time, maybe 4 or 5 years. But she's definitely somebody that I would call a best friend within a football environment. Yeah, definitely.
Superb. Tough one here. Best manager or coach played under?
I've played under some bad coaches and managers. Probably more than good, to be honest. Do you know what? Probably Gemma Davis, who I was coached and managed under last year. I think more so than anything, that I learned a lot from her, from a coaching perspective, in terms of the detail that she would go into for games and training. Like a real love the tactical side of the game, and just her work ethic as well. I think that's something that she's somebody that I learned a lot of. And ultimately we won the league with Gem, so I've probably got to say that one as well.
Superb. Who's been your toughest opponent?
I'm probably going to have to say Man United when we lost 12-0. But yeah.
Individually, who's been your toughest opponent individually?
Do you know what? I was actually having this conversation the other day. We played Chelsea away in a quarter-final of the FA Cup a couple of years ago, and they've got a centre mid that's called G. And I came on at half time, and I only played the second half. I honestly could have retired after that game. Like, she turned me inside out, genuinely. Like, her feet were ridiculous. Some of the passes that she saw, I have no idea how she saw them. Played on a 360 constantly. Just, I think she was next to me. I'd turn around, she'd gone. Wow. Like, genuinely one of the best players that I've ever played against.
Wow, superb. Who's been the best player you've played with?
I'm probably going to go back to my Everton days. Farrell Williams got to be one of the best people and best players that I've trained and played with, I think.
Best moment in football to date?
Winning the league. / coming back from all 3 injuries.
Biggest wow moment?
Oh, that's a tough question, that.
Anything that you've done and it's just gone, wow.
Do you know what? Probably coming back from the third ACL, because I think I'd been written off. I don't think they expected me to come back. I don't think I expected to come back, to be honest. So yeah, I'd probably say that one.
Who's been the biggest role model or influence in football for you?
Oh, my parents, without a question. Definitely my dad. I said at the start that he's everything rolled into one. He's my biggest fan, my biggest critic. You know, my chauffeur, my taxi driver, my dad, the person that puts his arm around me, the person that pushes me constantly. And yeah, probably my dad.
Describe yourself in 3 words.
Got 3 nice words.
You're cool. You're cool.
Hardworking. I don't think anybody can ever question that. I'm a very loyal person. And I'm very passionate about what I do.
Hardworking, loyal and passionate. Love it. Last one. Is there anyone you would recommend or like to hear on the podcast?
Do you know what? I've listened to a few of the podcasts, to be fair, and I've actually thought of a few people that Chloe would have been one of them that I'd have put forward. Player or coach, or anybody in particular? Just
anybody that you could think would share their experience and add value to anybody that listened.
Do you know what? I'm probably going to say Amy West. So Amy West is a player that I played with at Aston Villa. And she's been through a rocky road in terms of her career. Played under some really bad coaches, played under some excellent coaches. She could give a different aspect in terms of a younger player coming through a generation of football where it's in a better place than it was.
Okay.
And also is now a full-time professional footballer and has seen her hard work pay off.
Superb. I'll drop your message off air and see if we can hook that one up.
Yeah, and I'll put you in touch with her.
Superb. Kerri, I've taken an hour of your day and it's been a long time coming out, I must admit, but I just want to say thank you, one, for taking the time to speak to us here at PCT, and also being so open and honest. I can't imagine it's been comfortable speaking about what has been tough experiences for you. Again, thank you for being so open and honest, and I hope to see you again on a football pitch soon. If that doesn't come up, I know that you will succeed in anything that you do in terms of your coaching.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
There'll be a lot of gold dust that comes out of that, and I'm sure you'll inspire many. But keep safe. We'll keep in touch, mate, and hopefully we'll speak soon.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, guys.
Hello, we are Tile Central UK, local tile stockist here on Trentham Trade Park, Stanley Matthews Way. Our opening hours are 8 till 5 in the week and Saturdays till 12.